Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Scott Elliott. I'm the Artistic Director of the New Group Theater Company here in New York City. And we've been doing this conversation series that we call Why We Do It since the crazy pandemic hit, because it's been really sort of healing and wonderful to connect with some of our artists on an intimate level like this. Before we get to tonight's guest, Natasha Lyonne, I'm just going to make a little urgent plea for money, which I have to do every time I step out of the house these days. See on the bottom there, thenewgroup.org/support. If you have any extra cash hanging around, we'll take it. I know times are tough, but times are tough for the arts in New York City as well. So if you're feeling generous, give us a few bucks. Okay, so tonight, Natasha Lyonne. Natasha's a genius, as most of you out there know. I've known her for a really, really long time personally, and we got to work together many years ago. And since then, well, she's blossomed into a whole other Natasha Lyonne. And here she is tonight. Come on, bring her on, Natasha. Whoa, you really are a whole other Natasha Lyonne. What happened?
Staying grounded, Scott. I haven't lost the plot. This is all my voice. As you can see, there's a ring light in my eye.
And look, I love you have one of those lights. I got to get one of those because I'm on this all the time. They're really nice. Yeah.
You have the whole New York City skyline.
I do. I'm in New York. Here you go. Right. It's New York. Right. There's my water bottle just in case.
If it's the apartment I've been to, that's a great apartment.
Yeah, it is the apartment you've been to. Yeah, it's great because we have this terrace, which is nice, and so it's been nice. I haven't been here much the past few months, but I've been in and out, and I'm here a little bit more now. But so where are you? LA.
Undisclosed location at 666 Satan Lane.
Oh, right. I forgot that was your address.
Yes. Yeah. I know it's you don't forget it. And I want people to know where I live.
Exactly. They can send you things. They might send you good things because you're so lovable and you're so wonderful and you bring so much joy to so many people's lives, except maybe a few people not.
Definitely something in the misery.
That is so funny, Tosh. It's so great to see you. I feel like I haven't seen you. I don't think I saw you since the premiere of Russian Doll, and you probably don't even remember I was there because it was such a big night for you. But I went. Eric and I went with Chloe, and it was such a joy for all of us to be there and seeing you in that amazing work of yours. And I think that's the last time I saw you in person, which is probably a year, right?
I remember because we were all in the same row at the Metrograph.
That's right. That's right. We were.
Remember, I had Chloe on one side, Fred on the other, and then you were next to Chloe, right?
Oh, right. We were all in the same row. That's right. Yeah.
I think it's actually.
I was so engrossed, I barely remember.
Yeah, and I was on DMT, so the entire because I don't do that kind of stuff anymore except for DMT regularly.
That's good because exactly. I dropped a hit of acid before I went, so I thought it was really good.
Yeah, well,
it was a whole mind expanding experience for me. I learned everything from you, though. You know how it is.
And I learned Dennis Hopper. So.
That's good, Dennis Hopper. Yeah, nice. I thought I taught you everything you know. See, I get disappointed all the time.
Did Dennis Hopper ever do theater or?
I don't think so. Maybe he did I don't know. Not since I've been doing it, I don't think.
Yeah, well, he's been dead a while, I guess, now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When did he die?
I feel like maybe like 7 years ago or maybe 12.
Right.
Something.
12 or 7.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time with time during this whole COVID era. Like, I think I was talking the other day with another actor that we work with, Nico Santos, and we did a play together last year. And if you had asked me, I would have said 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's very odd. I'm really enjoying it as, a confirmed surrealist. It makes me feel like great peace that finally the world has sunk to my level because it's all just this mercurial, ether nightmare as far as I'm concerned. But it is really hard to have, or like, what's a weekend? You know what I mean?
What is it?
Hours stop? Are you supposed to stop work at some point when you never leave the house to work anyway? And so many things like that. And, but what can I say?
But you've been working though, but you've been working through it.
Wait, what?
You've been working though, right? You just directed something, didn't
I
you?
did. We just, I have this great production company with Maya Rudolph called Animal Pictures, and we produced Sarah Cooper, who's this incredible Trump impersonator. Although we're very proud that his name is never said in the special that we just made, a variety special for her, an election special, which obviously we shot during COVID with all of those limitations, and I did direct it, and it's coming out October 27th, so very soon now.
Wow.
And it was wild. I mean, like the problems that you encounter are so unexpected. Like, we're so used to making things and the usual sort of inevitable dramas that come out, but COVID just proposes a whole new set of absurd kind of difficulties that you never could have anticipated.
Yeah, tell us about it. I've heard some stories. Tell us about like what you had to go through to work.
Well, like, because they're still sort of in the process of deciding sort of what the protocols for safety are, and necessarily so, it's obviously it's a great thing that they're there to help in that way and keep everyone safe. But, so usually when you're making a movie, or if we were doing a play, I remember like, I'll never, like, us rehearsing with Ethan or whatever, and that big space was so great. But so a lot of it is about enclosed spaces and bodies, and not having, a certain amount of bodies in an enclosed space together. And of course, you also have to take all these dedicated breaks, like 15 minutes every 45 or 2 hours or something. So there's a lot of kind of stop and start in terms of the artist's flow or whatever, assuming that that's a real thing. And we know it is. Once you're kind of like in it, you almost are like, oh, we can't stop now. We just kind of started. And then they'll just sort of be these necessary. It's not like Scott gets to dictate when we're going to kind of like pause or restart. They're kind of mandated. But specifically what I'm referring to, there was one scene that was like inside of a room on a stage. And only once we started working where they let us know that there could only be 3 people at a time in the room. And of course, you have the camera people and you have focus pullers, you have 2 cameras, you have multiple actors. So like anytime, usually the arts are so kind of like multitasking and collaborative of, especially at a movie, it's like hair and makeup is happening at the same time. They're checking focus marks and it's all sort of happening at once. And they're kind of fixing your color and, playing with a light and all that sort of happening at once. But instead that happens in these like different sections. So you're just like, oh my God, it just becomes this molasses quicksand. And it's very, very weird.
I've heard all different stories about it. Was this with a particular like Netflix network or something, or?
Yeah, Netflix.
It's Netflix. Yeah, I've heard that those protocols, because they've been shooting some things around. Yeah, but at least they've figured it out and they've got some work going on. And did you feel comfy like with the work, like when you were actually in the work, other than the protocols? Were you able to get into it, or was it challenging?
I think it was pretty, there is that, like, this is where having like a weird point of view can be useful in strange times, because there was something really sort of weird and funny about like, always being in a mask and like, it's kind of, I always feel like my death as an actor is being overly expressive. Like I always feel like my eyes were just sort of made too big and weird to actually be like, like a dramatic whisper actor who like doesn't move a lot and is just a stone-faced killer. People love that, like.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a thing, but that's definitely not you.
Yeah.
No, you're too delicious. You're like a delicious thing. You're the epitome of that. Well, let's talk a little bit more about like your TV stuff and all that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the theater and all that stuff. But so I'm so curious. Like, so Russian Doll was brilliant, as I and everybody who saw it. I mean, everybody felt that way that I know. It's so brilliant. It stayed with me for so long, and not just because I love you, but so how, I remember when you were sort of working on it and you were putting it together, and it almost seemed impossible. Then all of a sudden it was there, and then we were all saying, oh my God, Natasha, and so tell us a little bit about the genesis of that and how you got to the story and then how you got it on.
Well, yeah, I mean, it really was like, which is maybe a comfort to people in the arts. And then, but it was like 7 years or something. It just a never ending saga. Like, and, you know, had all these sort of stop and starts. And obviously, Amy Poehler and I tried to make another show first, and we thought that show was getting picked up. Then that show did not get picked up.
Right. I remember that one.
Yeah.
Right.
And that show was like a network show where I was still named Nadia, and, you know, Ruth, who, you know, my real godmother, who's been to the new group tons of times, you know, so in that one, she was Ellen Burstyn on network TV, of course.
Right, I remember.
She's Elizabeth Ashley on Netflix. And, you know, there was somebody, Greta Lee, who's incredible, who plays.
So funny in your show, so funny.
In the other, the show we had made before. So there were like a lot of tentacles that were sort of, and that it was also that weird thing where, you know, the way things feel like such, you know, devastating hits when they don't happen, like you're just, you know, ravaged, because you're like, this was my thing. And you don't know how sort of time is going to unfold to reveal that actually that was not the thing. You got some information there, but the real thing was going to happen 3 years later with a lot of those same elements, you know? But it just took forever. And even once we had like scripts and green lights, it was still like every step of the way. And I think, you know, really not until it was like out in the world. And I think I had so much fear that I was almost going to be like bullied for it or something. I think I just have such a bad sort of like you know, junior high and high school experience of being like a weirdo that I thought something so personal was going to end up with like a lot of ridicule. And then the irony was the discovery that in fact it was like sort of trying to like hide myself and like morph into what I thought people wanted me to be my entire life and career was actually producing the, you know, inverse result of that. Was this like, as soon as, so it was very, you know, now I'm older now, of course I've been doing this since I'm 5 and now I'm 41. So it just like the idea that late in life in terms of for a 35-year career, whatever that is, 36, like to discover that the thing to do is just sort of like tell my truth in my way, and that was going to be the big achievement. I wish somebody had told me sooner. I really just, I mean, you've worked with me, you know that like so much of, you know, my dilemma is always feeling like I'm sort of like doing it wrong because I think I'm supposed to be something else, you know, that, and so, yeah, it was just not until it was out in the world and being so kind of like well received, not so much like critically, but like just more like emotionally, like by friends and by fans, and that people really seemed to get it and they were into it, and all its specificity was, you know, a life changer in terms of like soothing the white noise in my mind, or kind of this buoying spirit to kind of continue even when it's tricky.
Yeah, it gave you confidence, which is great. I mean, you've always had confidence, but you know, it is you, but you're a daring artist. So that's the wonderful thing about you. I mean, you're hilarious and a great actress, but you also have a great amount of daring, you know, which I love about your work always, and everything that you've done even before I knew you and I was seeing the things that you were doing. You always put yourself out there, and that's the only way, in my opinion, to make great work. And you know, it's funny when you were talking about, because I'm working on a little something with Ethan right now, and when we did the play with Ethan Hawke, you guys together were so daring. You know what I mean? And that was the sort of beauty on it, because he's so daring. I don't know if you've seen he's got a great show on now, The Good Lord Bird. It's amazing. And the two of you have now you've written these epic television shows and starred in them, which is it's because it takes a great amount of daring to do stuff like that. So what's next? I mean, you were supposed to start shooting and you got stalled.
Just because I feel like people don't really know necessarily like our history of like how seminal of a figure you specifically in the new group, you know, is in what that journey was for me in terms of like, obviously, you know, I'm like, you know, a career in several chapters, or a life, or
life in several chapters.
Yeah. And, you know, that I think there was really that, you know, there's like the kid actor, and then there's like, you know, the teenager, it's all happening. And then obviously I drop out and I'm a drug addict, and then getting clean for like 5-7 years. And it was really, I guess you called Chloe, and Chloe vouched for me. And then you and Mike Lee, you know, the Mike Lee play, obviously that you directed, you know, is what really brought me back to life of like, you know, I just want to kind of tell a little bit of it, which is like, I was living in a, you know, like rented, you know, like furnished, bizarre, like corporate living. And it was like next door to the theater because I was so scared that I was going to be a troublemaker in downtown New York. And I kind of like, I went all the way. I mean, let's even go back. Let's just do it. Which was like the audition process. And obviously I didn't know that you really sort of probably had your mindset on me. I was like, so, I mean, I went through Mike Lee's, obviously, David.
I remember. Yeah, you know what, but a little correction here that, because of course I knew you before. I think you had auditioned for me before you fell off the planet. And then, of course, Chloe and I remain close. This is Chloe 70. Everybody knows you guys are close. So I'm close to Chloe. And we were having dinner. I remember we were having dinner at Omen in Soho. And we were talking about, what we were doing, whatever. And I mentioned the Mike Lee play, and Mike wanted only Jewish people in the play. And and then Chloe said, well, Natasha's doing better. And I was like, no way. You know what I mean? All she has to do is a British accent, and she's got the gig if she's better. And and we put you through the paces a little bit just to make sure.
Well, so I went into a full, I have a task, you know what I mean? Like I was in such a kind of like tunnel of just like, I was reading fucking like 800-page Thomas Pynchon, Against the Day. I was like, had nothing but time. And suddenly like Chloe had given me a task. So I went into like full, yes, David Thewlis, Naked, Karen Cartledge, one of my all-time favorite movies. But I went into like the fucking deep cuts, Mike Lee, Stephen Gabus was on the case. We did the accents, the whole thing. I was like so off book. It was insane. Flew myself to New York, I had my coach ticket, and I remember I was staying at Ruth's house, and I didn't have, for some reason, it's not like I was that broke, but I couldn't figure out money yet. So I ended up with I had like fucked up, and I kept overdrawing my ATM card at that time. Like I didn't understand really. Well, I was just, you
skipped money. You skipped the money class. That happened.
I remember that like all she had was like a chocolate cake from the Borgata in Atlantic City in the fridge. So I just like ate that the night before instead of dinner. And then in the morning, I only had like $1.50 for reasons unknown, but I was in Murray Hill so I could walk there. So I bought like a coffee light and sweet and a Chipwich. And I was like, and I came to you with like my accent and I was ready to go. I was like, let's do
You were, I remember it. I remember. It was like one of the great moments. That I remember at the new group was your rebirth.
You gave me the job on the spot, did you not?
I think I did, yeah, because I knew I wanted you because I think you're brilliant, and I knew that Mike would love you, and he did. And so it was one of those things that like I just knew that it was that you were the right person for that thing. And not just that, just spiritually, it just all felt so right that particular role came up at the time when you were ready. So I always think like, that there's that connection. Like I could not see you for a year and look at you and feel like I saw you yesterday. And, in our industry, it's hard to say that, especially when you're hanging around with Maya Rudolph and Amy Poehler all the time, is that Uncle Scott comes back and haunts you for a conversation.
Yeah, but it was pretty special because it was, you really kind of like gave me a course in acting again, like that I'd never had, because I'd never really been a theater person. I mean, I'd been like, Nancy and Oliver in high school, but I was not.
But I remember your earlier audition for me. I can't remember what play it was, but I remember, and I thought you were teetering at that point. It was before you left, and I knew that I couldn't hire you then, but I knew that the talent was there, and I never forgot it. And that was how it it happened. Obviously, it's there because look at you now. So you did your play, and that was that you were amazing in the play, and it was fun.
And we did another one, and like that experience, just to get back, roll back to Ethan for a second, that it was so extraordinary because I think because we'd had that experience, like I basically spent like, as a result, 2 years of my life at the new group, and just like consistently of just like, that was my home. Now that was my safe haven. And now I understood what life as a New York actor was going to be. And, but Ethan was a trip because I think in the first one, I so badly kind of like wanted to get it right. And then suddenly like Ethan appeared and he was like, yeah, we kind of do this. I'll never forget. Remember how scared I was to like, cry on stage and stuff like that. Like you really had to work me to sort of like teach me. And I'll never forget that the last night of Blood from a Stone, the last performance where they'd all gone off without a hitch. And the very last night, he was like rubbing my feet or whatever. I'm like his pregnant, nurse sister. And just in the middle of it, like, and I was thinking, I'm really going to miss him. This is really, look what a good foot massage this guy gives. He's a decent guy in the end. And he was looking at me all Ethan eye sparkly and like mischievous on stage. And I was like, wow, we're really reading each other's minds. We're going to miss each other. And then so I don't know who it was, but suddenly the lines were just gone like dust. And
I think I remember that.
And it was the scariest thing that I've experienced in terms of, because I was like, not experienced enough to have a sense of like, what happens now? And I just remember that like, there was like, in that moment, just sort of time stopped. And it was just like ether being thrown back and forth at each other as we kept looking at each other, being like, you know what's happening. I know what's happening. You don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix it. What happens now? And then it was like, I don't know if that moment went on for 5 seconds or 7 minutes of silence. I have no idea. But it was like really that, yeah, I just remember that. And also I remember how we had to make that sandwich all the time? It was a lot of cold cuts and like bread.
There was a lot of food and water. Remember all the water and the house fell apart. Yeah, that was I love that show and I love that cast. And how about Ann Dowd? Took off. She took off from that. Yeah, like after we had her there, her career just went crazy. It was amazing what happened to her. And that show birthed both of you in a way. I mean, of course, Ann's been around, but her career just took a major turn after that show, and she's been doing great.
Oh my God, I learned so much from her of just like the real act. Because I would say to her, like every night it feels like, being shot out of cannon. I remember Daphne Rubin Vega is also in that, who's incredible.
Amazing.
She would say to me, like, that's the hardest thing, to be shot out of a cannon when the play is already going and you have to like get your engine up to kind of just come on stage, 30 minutes in for like 7 minutes and then disappear again for an hour and then come back for 20 minutes. Like, she was like, that's really hard. And like, Anne would just sort of like, sit there sort of like in her zone. She's very much like Laura Esterman had that about her too. You know what I mean? Like they were just hardcore pros. And
yeah, they're like incredible stage actors, both of those women.
And Anne would be like, but it's not supposed to be like a magical mystery tour. If you really like know your thing, then it's supposed to be that it's like it's a skill. So you're able to just kind of dial it in. And I was like, sort of like, interesting. I don't know that I'm doing that because I think I'm doing it much more of like my like own self-taught version of like reading Cassavetes on Cassavetes and like Cindy Lumet making movies and being like, there's some version of a methody thing that's supposed to happen when the air in the room feels a certain way. Lean into that truth or something. And then if you feel like you're lying, you got to lean out, so it was interesting.
Yeah, but the cool thing about that experience for you, I guess, was being surrounded. I mean, because Ethan and Dowd, Daphne, I mean, like those are like real stage creatures. They're like this, they all, were birthed in the theater. And it was really wonderful watching you figure out how to, go there with that. I mean, it was like 2 steps for you. And then you left the nest.
That's showbiz.
I'm gonna get you back in the nest one day. There's no doubt.
Well,
if the theater ever opens again, I'll get you back.
Yeah, Elaine Stritch at Liberty. Then I'm gonna be back for like my D. Arthur era.
I think that would be funny if maybe we should do Elaine Stritch at Liberty and you could play Elaine Stritch. Wouldn't that be weird?
Yeah.
That sounds like a weird COVID era.
Elaine rolled over in her grave and she's like, "Not over my dead body."
Yes, she'll send us some English muffins. That was what she sent me as a present once, a big box of English muffins, because she has that family English muffin cat. Did you know that? That was her big gift. Like if you worked together or did something, she would send you the big box, literally like of about 100 English muffins, because her family owns an English muffin company up in New England somewhere. Not Thomas's. The ones that you get in the diner, those big doughy ones.
I mean, it really is something though. Like you and Ethan as like this, wild like maverick duo are pretty fascinating. Just like when I really think about it with some distance of just like the mischief of it more than anything. Like, because you're always like, I don't care. Like that's just turn your back away from the audience or whatever. It's not your problem. If that's not what's in the scene, is on. And like, you have this kind of like light in your eyes of mischief during rehearsal. That's very like, I don't know what's going to happen now. And then you get on stage with Ethan, and that really is, I think, probably like why he has like such love for the theater, is that is his kind of most like natural state of chaos. He's like, you can just see that he's like, now it's my time. And he kind of seems like, I'm going to like make this moment into whatever it's airbending almost, because it's a real, he just seems like, it's almost like a musician playing music is what I imagine the sort of like feeling is like that I've been able to tap into with you guys when I'm like, playing with the band and it really is something how, like you're only in theater will you completely like disassociate from your body, and you actually forget, if you do it enough, like where I end and the thing begins, because in certain moments you've just done it so much. I'm guessing it's almost like TM. I mean, what do I know from this? But in a weird way, like you actually are just, for some moments, you're actually only in that moment in that person's body, and you don't even know how it happened. You only know that you've left and that you're back to being yourself on stage playing someone. Like, I briefly touched that.
Well, that's how you're really there. I think, like that's, how they talk about like really being in the moment is when you forget about yourself and you're really, and it's hard, and I don't think you can plan it. As you say, it's one of those things that when you work at it and you keep going deeper and thinking deeper thoughts and allow yourselves to forget about who you are and start thinking about the thoughts that the character would have, you can really have some of those moments. It's funny that you're talking about that, because I'm working on this thing with Ethan, and I just saw him today, and we were talking about, theater as music and how the musicality of it is really part of it. And it can't be imposed, really. It's something that has to be felt. Because if you're not feeling it, then you're not feeling it. But then you have to fake it, right? Because you can't not cry, right?
Well, but that's what I remember about that sandwich moment with him, was like, I just remember that I was like, one moment I was just doing the scene, and then the next moment, like, I think I had like a cold cut in my hand or something, and I was like, where did this come from? And I was like, oh, right, I'm in the scene making a sandwich. But like that moment was just compressed in time, and suddenly I was just handing him the plate with the sandwich, and like there had been this disappeared, and just but like looking up, and that he's the person I was handing it over to, and he just had a glint in his eye of almost like he could feel that I disappeared into the cold cut, and he was like, I'm right there, baby. Like it really is pretty wild. And I feel like you as a director are basically like, always like running back in, and you're basically like, you didn't disappear into the sandwich. I could tell from back there. And 2 days ago, you actually did. And that was closer to it, and much more than it's like, stand over here. This is the moment where it's dramatic. It's much more of like, how much have you become the music instead of just like knowing the different parts, like.
Yeah, I think there is a certain way of directing that, as you say, you made your thing up. I made my thing up too. I didn't learn how to direct. I made it up, just the way you made up how to act. But I think that's part of, what that's part of your gift. Your talent is what, you can't learn talent. You have talent. You can hone it. You could mush it up a little bit, but that's what, that's who you are. That's who several of our friends are like that. Who are really, really, really talented. And so how do you apply, all that you learned in the theater to the work that you're doing now? Because you're doing so much. I mean, before COVID, you've been doing a lot of things. You've been doing a lot of things. You produced a movie, you were in a movie, or you were working on all sorts of things. And so what did the theater do for you to get you there?
I honestly, like, understood. It was very much like the adulting phase in a weird way of like, I actually understood what for all this talk about, mercurial shape-shifting time. Oddly, the thing about the theater is like, there is no fucking around in that area of like, you better be there. There is no trailer. There is no like sense of we're going to fix it in post, or you blew. There is this kind of like barreling through, and like, you got to show up because there are people there. And, meaning I think I really, I guess part of that was the process of understanding that, feelings are just that. And you better bring your feelings with you and sort of come as you are in this way of, you better just fold them into the moment. So if that's the best version of the truth you're going to have today, great. But there's like, it's not an option to be like, I just need an extra 30 minutes or something to get in the zone like that. So essentially what that ends up being is sort of like a discipline of, like method over emotion or whatever, or self-doubt or self-judgment or self-criticism, that there's, and I think and also sort of preparedness of like, you got to show up on time. And then you really like, I think now I almost know my lines too much sometimes, especially in this era of like, improv is, for better or worse, becomes so sexy to people. And I think because of you and the time at the New Group, I really became a like, if that's an ellipses, it's in there for a reason, and only to discover that often it was not. And they were kind of like, just say what you want. So that was big, but mostly I think it's that sort of like, I also think then launching into like 7 years of Orange is the New Black was an interesting, combination, because it was again the same lesson, which is like, it's not about your outsides and it's not about how you're doing that day. It's kind of like, you show up, you put on your uniform, you don't wear makeup in the show, and you fucking just do the thing to the best you can that day. You know what I mean? And try to kind of like be as respectful as you can of all the players around you, because you're going to be with them for like a very long stretch. So in so many ways, sort of like understanding the rules of, discipline and adulthood, and sort of like how to, I think that's like a big sort of ego problem that a lot of people have, like in the arts or in youth, is not understanding that like other people are real on the most basic level, like not understanding how much like one's own, behavior or feelings, like just essentially like you're not the center of the fucking universe. Nobody is. So it's like, nobody really cares if your Metro card wasn't working and that's why you couldn't get to the fucking thing, because at the coffee shop, there was a long line, like enough, you know what I mean? So it sort of really, I think, set me up to basically be from there, be able to sort of like multitask much more, because there was kind of like a discipline to sort of like within these lines, as much chaos as you want, but not chaos outside that is destructive to the actual creative process.
That's so interesting. Orange is the New Black. That seemed like, in a weird way, like a theater piece because of the ensemble nature of the whole thing and the sort of lived-in sort of feeling of the whole thing. Were there similarities? Did you have flashbacks of the theater when you were in there?
Yeah, and I think a lot of those people are kind of like New York theater or Carolina.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah,
and like because there's sort of like not really like a lot of lighting or a lot of shots. It really is just about like, Genji Cohen really likes that it's just the words. Like, so it is actually oddly similar. Like she's not, having whatever directed one episode of the show, like she's not really interested in like, this cool, like low angle, or it's a oneer or whatever. She really wants to like hear her words and see people say them. So it is oddly like a, long theater piece in terms of like that, the play is the thing, like the playwright, and that is the big, I think in general, that's why writers tend to really enjoy TV as opposed to movies where it gets like, butchered by the filmmaker or the actors or something. They're the showrunner. They feel like they kind of like own it. And it just, there's, you basically just have this, and like, that's all the tricks you have up your sleeve. There's not going to be a lot of, magic and like music cues and lighting cues and stuff like that sort of break it up. So I do think it was sort of an extension in a weird way.
And did that influence Russian Doll in some way in your writing of Russian Doll? Like, because you wrote every episode of that, right? Or pretty much.
But also with Leslie Headland, who's like a crucial.
Oh, Leslie, right, of course, yeah.
Because of course she's such an accomplished playwright and so brilliant. And,
right.
And also Amy Poehler, who wrote on it, and also Alison Silverman, Jocelyn Bio wrote on it. One of my favorite new plays of all time, Schoolgirls. And Sharako Dunlap and Tammy Sager and Flora Birnbaum. And so, on the first season. And so there were a bunch of us. I mean, I wonder, and also Leslie directed a ton of that. And again, she's like really comes from playwright first. So it is worth noting. I do remember like that Inception idea with me and Amy sitting in a car kind of talking about it after the other show collapsed. We were like, what should we do? And at the time it was sort of based on a little bit of like scenes from Marriage, the Bergman, and this idea that we we would just hire playwrights and that they would write and direct their own standalone episodes. And it would basically be that Nadia would go to this sort of like no exit, exterminating angel, never ending party. And every episode she would bring back one person to sleep with. And it would be, whether it was the doorman or it was whatever, some hot chick or it was some stud, it didn't matter if 3 of them at the same time, who cares? And that we would have it sort of be like an extended, 1-act play each episode. And the early days, that was even how we like arrived at the idea of Leslie for it. I mean,
so you went after a playwright.
Yeah, I think that was sort of part of our thinking in a way. But in the end, I don't know that it was, I think it was sort of like enough heavily influenced by the end by sort of like heavy 70s reference stuff that's much more my natural kind of sweet spot, which is like, obviously like Altman, Elliott Gould in The Long Goodbye was a huge reference, As was a huge reference, or like, Paris, Texas visually was a big reference of Inventors. And so just like a lot of different things that, this kind of a certain kind of New York and that kind of like that. I mean, more than anything, I think Elliott Gould's performance of like a Philip Marlowe type in The Long Goodbye of just like that sort of like mumbly kind of 70s Jewy kind of, but like a hipster. And, obviously that's why the cat is a big deal in just stuff like that really sort of shifted by the end.
I love hearing all these influences because I didn't, now that I'm thinking back at it, I understand everything that you're saying, because if you had said this to me beforehand, I would have been like, oh, she's a crackpot. But you really did. I'm thinking of everything that you said, all those influences, because they're influences that I relate to as well. I think a lot of people might not know just what a cinephile you are and how much you know about cinema and you just, I mean, if ever I want to ask anything about cinema, you're the first person I would go to.
Yeah, I mean, the other weird thing, which I learned, everything I know, I learned at the Film Forum.
Right. You used to live across the street, right? You live right there, right? No,
I wish I did.
I'm thinking of somebody else.
Close enough.
Some other actress I'm thinking about.
Who knows?
There's so many.
I've tried, though. There are apartments that I've looked at strictly because of their, proximity to the Film Forum that I then was not able to rent because they weren't good apartments. But I'm often like, now this one is close to the Film Forum. I do think that's my big goal in life, is to like make it enough that I can have some form of a screening room that I can just like sit in alone. Like I've never actually seen the Howard Hughes DiCaprio. I've only seen the picture, but of him like sitting there naked,
watching movies.
Yeah, I think that is my ultimate fantasy for.
It might happen if you keep going how you're going. What's going to happen? What has COVID done to season 2 of Russian Doll? I know that you were getting ready to.
We were in pre-production, we wrote it, and now it's been shut down, and now hopefully, we're going to make it soon. I mean, it's really.
Well, they don't tell you when or anything like that yet.
Or shooting in New York. Have you been seeing a lot of?
No, not a lot of shooting in New York. It's and not only that, but like I've heard of a lot of things that have almost happened, and then I mean, like it almost feels like the moment for indie movies is over because the cost of making indie movies right now. I only know people who are working in expensive things like big Hollywood movies that are shooting in Europe or but not New York City.
We got to get some of those, Scott. We're doing it.
You got to write one, and you got to put me in it, or let me direct, or something. I don't want to direct one of those, but you got to write it. I'll be in it. I'll direct it.
Like the Avengers or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We can make our own version of something like that. That sounds fun. You should do something like that. And so, what are you writing? Are you writing now?
That's been the nice thing, I guess, about all this society as we know it shutting down, is it really like forced me to have that time to really do these other things. And I'm like, oh, I think I actually might be this person. Like at first, I thought it was a bit of a, anyway, just sort of unsure if it was. I was grown up enough for it, and now I'm like, oh, I've sort of really starting somewhere in COVID. I ended up with definitely some 10,000 hours going of just writing a whole bunch of things and really
write a play. Why don't you write a play?
I mean, that feels hard. Have you written a play?
No, it's the hardest thing to write. I never would try it, but I think you could probably do it. I think that you could. I think you could, though. I think you should think about that, because maybe if you're sitting around, like, expand your horizons. I'll produce it. You write it. I'll produce it, man.
Agisha Magisha, this is a new homework assignment. But what about, wait, Scott, did you always know that you were like destined to be like a director,
No.
theater?
No, not at all. I was an actor. I was an actor, and I just hated it. And then I knew that I knew that I didn't want to do my whole life like that. And then, I don't know, I took a tiny break and did some other things. And then I thought, I missed it too much, but I didn't want to act. And I sort of, I don't know, I had a lot of experiences with directors that I didn't think were, I don't know. And I thought, well, maybe I could give it a try and see if I can tell a story. And I didn't want to ask for any jobs, so I started the New Group. That's how it happened. I didn't want to like run around and look for directing jobs. I thought the New Group was going to be like open and shut. Truthfully, it was a surprise that it took off. It was like one of those things. I directed a play. I wasn't sure whether it was good or not, because it was the only thing that people liked it, and that's how the New Group took off. So
it's so crazy because it suits you so impeccably. It's so like, I'm sure we've talked about this before, but it was probably like 10 years ago, and but
well,
yeah,
I felt at home. Like, that's the one thing that I knew. Like, I knew that if the New Group didn't take off, I would be sad, because I did feel much better than I did when I was acting. You know what I mean? I just felt better. And I knew that I could live my life in that sort of body. And, as you know, it's a million sacrifices to run a nonprofit theater company in so many different ways, that in order to sort of do it. But I just became addicted to it, and I felt encouraged. And of course, as you say, when you feel encouraged, you try to follow those paths. Yeah, and I followed the path, and that's how it happened. I still can't believe it. And it's already, it's been decades.
Well, it really is something when people are just supposed to do a certain thing or whatever. And it's just, I wonder if that's like what it's like for everybody. Quantum physicists are like, no,
I think people who are good at their jobs, or who love their jobs, I'll say, because good is relative. So if you love your job and you feel whole in your job, I mean, look at you. You started acting when you were 5, and your life has had so many different twists and turns, and you've always come out better. And that's the sort of beauty of Natasha Lyonne. And the thing that I find inspiring about you is exactly that. I mean, I know you told the story, but I do feel like you're one of our success stories in a way, because New Group, whenever we think of anybody, we always think of you. Of course, you're no longer available, but one day I'll get you back, and I'll get you on the stage again, and you're gonna like have another breakthrough. You'll win a Tony Award. I'm telling you, this is your trajectory in life. We always said, you were going to do better when you got older, and that's, or people, but that's true. You have an old soul, and so you've grown into your soul. I can even see it now.
I want to be like, Dame Judi Dench in one of those James Bond movies. That's what I'm going to.
Yeah, you're destined for that.
Then
you're destined.
Okay, Q, or whatever the fuck they say, and be that guy.
You're destined for something like that if you want it. But I see you doing great things. I mean, you're already doing great things. You created like an amazing television show, truly an amazing and memorable television show. And, there'll be another season, and there'll be another television show. There'll be a movie. You'll direct it. You'll be in it. I have no doubt. And then you'll come back and do a little play with me.
Yeah, if I'm still alive. It all begins and ends in the theater for like real New Yorkers. Like,
it really does. It begins and ends in the theater. I miss it so much. It took me. It's been rough. I mean, we are making things, but we're certainly not making plays. And so it's a really rough. It took me a moment to sort of get over it, because it really is who I am. So.
Is there any sense of when it's going to be?
I mean, when there's a vaccine. It's going to be hard to get people in the theater till there's a vaccine. That's just the truth of it. And we're all hoping, for, next summer, fall, I don't know, when there's it's going to be a hall, and we're all, I guess trying to, make art and continue to make art in different ways. And we'll be telling people about that shortly. But but I have to say that on a positive note, it's opened us up in a very interesting way, and we're working with different people because we're making different kinds of art, and so it's interesting, and it's been really fascinating, and I'm trying to look at everything positively because, why not?
Yeah.
Why
Well,
not?
the new group, keep the arts alive.
Yeah, exactly. Donate to the new group. Keep the episode. All right. Anyway, we're done with this part of the conversation, which I can't believe it. They're writing to me. So we're going to be going into our private part and signing off here. And the people who have bought the cocktail hour with us or with Natasha, you're going to go on Zoom. I'll say one more time if you want to donate. Oh, they were right on it. You can go right to that link and give us a little donation. We'll take it. And Natasha, I love you. It's great talking to you. I'm really looking forward to the next part of the conversation to hear the Q&A. And we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back together with a whole other group of people.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.